All right, so today we're going to kind of look at something a little bit different.
Okay.
It's about finding God,
Right.
but through the lens of game theory.
Yeah, that's right. We're looking at, for this deep dive, a blog post by a former Goldman Sachs analyst.
Oh, wow.
And what makes this perspective so fascinating is that he spent a decade going from agnosticism to belief.
Oh, wow.
And he uses his analytical background to explore these really intriguing ideas about faith.
Okay, so this isn't like, Candyland or Monopoly or something like that,
Right.
We're talking about real game theory like John Nash, Beautiful
Exactly.
Mind, and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. The author's core idea is that finding proof of God
Okay,
isn't a solo experiment, it's a multiplayer game.
I see.
And just like in any game, there are other players involved.
Okay.
In this case, God being one of them.
So instead of just like, me doing an experiment,
Right.
there's another participant
Exactly.
who's making moves and influencing the outcome.
Precisely.
Okay.
And he uses this really compelling analogy to illustrate this point.
Okay.
Imagine a job interview.
Okay.
It's not just about you trying to impress the interviewer.
Right.
The interviewer is also evaluating you,
I see.
looking for certain qualities and making decisions based on your responses.
So it's not a one-way street.
Exactly.
It's a two-way street.
It is.
We're trying to find God.
Right.
But in a way, God is also evaluating us.
That's the really intriguing concept that the author puts forward.
Okay.
He even takes it a step further.
Okay.
With a rather vivid example.
Okay.
A brilliant but morally flawed applicant,
Oh.
someone with a perfect GPA,
Uh-huh.
but also a history of serious wrongdoing.
Okay.
Would a company hire them based solely on their intellect?
No, probably not.
Right? There's more to the equation than just smarts.
You want someone who's also ethical
Exactly.
and trustworthy and all those kinds of things.
Exactly.
So is he saying that God might be looking for something
Yeah.
more than just like,
Yeah.
intellectual qualifications when it
Yes.
comes to revealing himself?
That's exactly where he's going with this.
I see.
It ties into his belief that arrogance bias
Uh-huh.
in trying to force our own standards on to God
Yeah.
could actually hinder our search.
That makes me think about all kinds of things.
Right.
Like, even when we think that we're being objective,
Yeah.
we all come with bias.
Absolutely. Baggage.
Of course.
Yeah, it's like trying to solve a puzzle using only the pieces that fit our preconceived idea of what the picture should be.
Yeah. Are we really open to discovering the truth?
Right.
Or are we just looking for evidence that confirms what we already believe?
Exactly. That's the crucial question that the author raises.
Yeah, so like if we're stuck in our own heads,
Right.
trying to dictate the rules of the game,
Yeah.
we might miss what God is trying to show us.
Exactly. And that leads him to advocate for a more unconventional approach.
Okay.
Creative prayer.
I like that creative prayer.
It's about acknowledging our doubts
Uh-huh.
and asking for guidance in finding the truth, regardless of what that truth may be.
Okay.
He even gives an example of such a prayer.
Oh, really? I'm curious. What kind of prayer is he talking about?
He suggests something along the lines of, God, I don't know if you exist. I only want the truth. Help me find the truth.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
It is.
It's like really opening yourself up
Yeah.
to a whole other way of thinking.
It is. By approaching faith with that kind of humility and openness,
Yeah.
you're essentially signaling to God that you're willing to play by his rules, even if you don't know what those rules are yet.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this game theory analogy works.
Right.
We're not in control,
Right.
but we can make moves to improve our chances
Exactly.
of winning the game of finding God.
Precisely. And that brings us to another key point, the idea that proof of God is personalized.
Okay.
Just like different people are convinced by different types of evidence in other areas of life, the author believes that God reveals himself in ways that are tailored to each individual.
So there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this.
Exactly.
What might work for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Yeah, it really highlights the complexity of this whole multiplayer game. We can't just assume we know all the rules or that everyone's playing with the same objectives.
Right. So if we're thinking about this in terms of game theory,
Yeah,
what are some of the moves that we might consider making
right.
in this interaction with God? Like, does he offer any advice on that?
He doesn't give us a step-by-step playbook, but
Okay.
I think that's intentional.
Right.
He's emphasizing the personal and even mysterious nature of this game.
Right.
Remember, it's not about manipulating God.
Right.
It's about aligning ourselves with his will
Okay.
and being receptive to his guidance.
So he doesn't give us specifics, but
Right.
he does hint at
He does.
some potential strategies, right?
He does. And they tie back to the core principles of game theory.
Okay.
Think about it. Your choices in any game depend on the other players involved,
Right.
their potential moves,
Uh-huh.
and what you're ultimately trying to achieve.
So we're considering what God might be looking for
Exactly.
and what actions
Right.
might please him or displease him as we
Exactly.
try to understand his strategy.
Exactly. The author suggests qualities like humility, sincerity,
Mm-hmm.
and a genuine desire for truth
Okay.
as potential moves that align with God's strategy.
It's like we're trying to figure out the win condition of the game.
Right.
If we can understand what God values,
Yes.
we can make choices that increase our chances of winning, which in this
Exactly.
case means coming to know him.
Right. And that's where his emphasis on prayer
Uh-huh.
and self-reflection comes in.
Okay.
By cultivating certain qualities within ourselves,
Uh-huh.
we may create the conditions that make it more likely for God to reveal himself.
So these actions aren't about manipulating God.
Right.
They're about putting ourselves in a receptive state,
Precisely.
signaling that we're serious about the search
Exactly.
and willing to play by his rules.
But here's where the analogy to a multiplayer game gets even more fascinating.
Okay.
The author points out that God hasn't given everyone the same level of proof.
Hmm.
Some people seem to find it very easily,
Right.
while others struggle for a lifetime.
Yeah, it's almost like some people have an unfair advantage in this game.
Well, think about it in terms of game theory.
Okay.
It's like everyone starts with different resources,
Uh-huh.
or maybe they're playing on slightly different maps.
Right.
Some might have had experiences that give them a head start.
Okay.
Or maybe they have a natural inclination towards faith. Others might face more obstacles,
Yeah.
doubts, personal tragedies,
Uh-huh.
or simply a lack of exposure to religious ideas.
So even with different starting points,
Right.
you can still make strategic moves to improve your chances.
Exactly.
It's about understanding the rules,
Right.
being persistent,
Yes.
and making choices that align with what God seems to be seeking.
Which is why the author emphasizes asking for forgiveness,
Uh-huh.
seeking guidance,
Okay.
and trying to understand God's perspective actions that can help us move closer to the win condition,
Okay.
even if the journey is long and challenging.
So I can see how this framework is helpful.
Yeah,
But if we're playing a game with God,
right.
doesn't that feel kind of transactional?
That's a great question, and I think it highlights a potential pitfall of this analogy.
Yeah.
Taken too literally, this game theory approach can lead to a calculated and manipulative view of faith.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to outsmart God or something.
That's why it's crucial to remember the author's emphasis on sincerity and humility.
Right.
This isn't about some spiritual chess match where we're trying to outmaneuver God.
Right. It's more about aligning ourselves with his will,
Exactly.
being open to his guidance,
Right.
and accepting that the outcome is ultimately in his hands,
Precisely.
not ours.
The game theory analogy is helpful for understanding the strategic aspects of faith.
Right.
But it shouldn't overshadow the trust, surrender, and love that are at the heart of a genuine connection with God.
So it's a balance between strategy and devotion.
Yeah, exactly.
We could be both clever and humble,
Yeah.
persistent and open to being surprised.
And I think that's a profound challenge, don't
Yeah,
you?
it really is. But
We've been talking about proof and the win condition in this game.
right.
What does that actually look like?
Yeah.
If God reveals himself in different ways to different people,
Right.
what forms might this proof take in practice?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Well, that's a question that takes us to an even deeper level of this exploration.
Okay, so we're saying this game of finding God isn't about forcing a specific outcome.
Right.
It's about understanding there are other players,
Yeah,
including God,
exactly.
and aligning ourselves with his strategy.
Right.
But the proof, the evidence that we're on the right track, that can look different for everyone, right?
Absolutely. And that's what makes this so compelling. The author doesn't give us like a checklist of proofs
Right.
because he's emphasizing the mystery and the individual nature of those encounters.
So we're not looking for like a universal sign from God that everybody experiences the same way.
Right. It's much more nuanced than that. Think of it this way. If God wants to reveal himself to you,
Yeah.
he's going to use methods that resonate with you specifically.
Right.
Your personality, your background, your unique experiences.
So for someone like our author,
Right.
with this analytical background, maybe the proof comes through like a really powerful intellectual argument
Exactly.
that just suddenly clicks for them.
For someone else, it might be a series of synchronicities,
Oh.
those seemingly coincidental events that feel like they're pointing towards something bigger.
Yeah, like you're walking down the street and you see, a billboard.
Right. Or it could be a profound emotional experience,
Uh-huh.
a feeling of overwhelming love or peace that defies rational explanation.
Or like a breathtaking sunset or something that just makes you feel
Precisely.
connected to something so much bigger than yourself.
The point is, there's no single formula for what constitutes proof.
Okay?
It's about being open to experiencing God in whatever way he chooses to reveal himself to you.
Okay, so that's kind of exciting, but also a little intimidating.
Is.
I mean, it means we really need to pay attention
Right.
to those subtle little nudges, those moments that make us stop and go, wait a minute,
Yeah.
there's something more going on here.
And it requires a certain amount of trust
Right.
Trust that God is at work in our lives even when we don't recognize it.
Right.
Trust that he's leading us even if the path isn't always clear.
So this game isn't just about like strategy and intellect.
Right.
It's also about developing our capacity for faith,
It
for
is.
believing in something beyond what we can see and touch.
And that's perhaps the most profound lesson of all. This whole idea of approaching faith as a multiplayer game
Yeah.
might seem unconventional at first, but I think it ultimately points to a deeper truth about belief.
It's not about passive acceptance or blind faith.
Right.
It's about active engagement,
Yeah,
about seeking questioning,
absolutely.
being willing to step outside of our comfort zones to discover something truly extraordinary.
And it's a journey that's available to anyone, regardless of their background or beliefs.
Right.
Whether you're a lifelong believer, a hardened skeptic, or somewhere in between,
Yeah.
this game is open to all who are willing to play.
So if you're intrigued by this idea,
Yeah,
take a cue from our Goldman Sachs author.
yeah,
Ask the tough questions, explore a different spiritual path,
absolutely.
and most importantly, be open to the possibility that God is already at work in your life,
Yeah,
waiting to be discovered. Who knows what incredible insights you might find?
right.
The game is on, and the possibilities are truly endless.